Hi, my dragons. How you doing? Dr. Victor here. I just walked in the door from New York, actually, Hudson Valley, where for the past week, this is why I haven't graded your stuff yet, because I'm behind on everything. Tiffin University sent me and 3 other people to do a training in what we call DIE, Diversity, Inclusion, and Equity. I was certifying 200 executives in cultural competence. And these were executives from social service agencies, mental health agencies, State Board of Mental Health, boards of developmental disabilities, that sort of thing. And so we had good training, and now at least the administrators, the CEOs, are certified. So I was reading the class standards and your comments in the forum, which are all excellent, of course. And I was reading some of the frustration that some of you experience, and of course John's comments on going to different places and asking people about class standards. So in my training, and they have been through different sorts of diversity training before, but they haven't been certified, and so this was our training week. But anyway, I asked, how many of you know the class standards? There were 200 executives there, and when I asked how many know class standards, MCOD, which is Multicultural Organizational Development, and the Cross Continuum, which after you do an assessment on your agency to see where you are at, where all your employees are at in terms of cultural competence, you're then classified according to the continuum that's either, culturally proficient or cultural devastation or something. And you're placed on this continuum, and it just gives you some idea of where you have to go. So when I asked 200 people who knew what, 2 people said that they knew what they were and that they were aspiring to infuse those into their agency. So that showed that we had some work to do. And it was very interesting, and I used a lot of examples. I did my workshops, of course, on the law and how agencies, the best thing that can happen at an agency is that you're compliant. So if CREP goes in, like JCH, to do an audit, that they see that you're doing cultural competence stuff, and they do follow class standards, and they don't ding you on that accreditation process. JCAH, which John mentioned in his thing, and Denise as well, they also look for those things as well in their accreditation process. But only 2. So that was really interesting. So my thing was on the law, and the very best thing that can happen is that we help everyone. Everyone in the agency is inclusive and equitable and culturally competent, right? And then the absolute worst thing that will happen if you're not culturally competent and you're excluding people and things are not going well is the inevitable lawsuit. So I just wrote that in the forum and said, either by law or lawsuit will we accomplish this. So I'm hopeful that this is what will come to pass, and we have made a lot of strides. And so the reason I know that we're making a lot of strides is because we're very busy certifying a lot of agencies all over the place, and agencies of all different types. So not just mental health, social services, boards of developmental disabilities. We're also at police headquarters. We're also at criminal justice, correctional facilities, and we're also at businesses, things like that. So my work, I broke them into groups so that they could work on what's cultural competence. Here are some blunders that happened along the way, real life stories of things that people did. And the most egregious one, of course, was the Zanesville water case that everybody lost their minds over. But they hadn't heard of it, so they didn't hear of the class standards, but they also hadn't heard of the Zanesville case, which was really a famous case. I mean, it was on 60 Minutes and every single major news outlet. They hadn't heard of it, and so they were going through my list of blunders and how would they fix it. And they were all blunders of cultural competence. And so they really enjoyed that because they hadn't heard of a lot of the different things. I even included the mayor of Toledo when They were going to expand the Toledo airport, and Burlington Air Express was coming in. And Burlington Air Express has a reputation, it's a air freight. And so it's going to be noisy. So they did an EIS, which they always do EIS, it's environmental impact statement. So they did a study to see what the decibels were and if it would disturb the wildlife, the flora, the fauna, the people, whatever. And the mayor of Toledo came up with his own idea of how to deal with the noise by the airport. And he said, this is my idea. And this made national news too. We will move all the deaf people out there, and then we won't have to worry about how noisy it is. Like, he literally said that. So that was a cultural competence blunder that you made on national TV. I had 40 of those, and they were taken from OCRC, Ohio Civil Rights Commission, lawsuits, and those sorts of things. And some of them, they were like, oh my God, I don't believe this happened. I'm like, oh, I will send you the video. This really happened. So yeah, like, you can't make that stuff up, like all the lawsuits that that happen because of cultural incompetence. I'm laughing, but it really is not funny, to exclude people, to make them feel like there's no other recourse but to sue, or to be in such flagrant violation of civil rights law that they have to do things like this. So they really liked that that informative session about cultural competence and the law. And we did some other workshop things too, but it went really well. The only thing that was kind of interesting was because it was the last week of classes. And of course I have a full load of classes, and I was telling my students, oh, I'm not going to be here, so we'll have to do some online stuff. And when you're in a semester where you're taking a class like human sexuality, everybody wants to be in class. But so we did that, and it's like the week before finals week. So the class situation, class standards, and MCOD, multicultural organizational development, how to make your agency more culturally proficient, that sort of thing. Those are very important and often overlooked. I'm always surprised at, like when I ask 200 people, executives, CEOs, CFOs, all of that, have you heard of this? And they say no. Then, that's disheartening for the organization and the services that they provide for the individuals. So you really see that coming out when there's complaints. In Ohio, you have, of course, the Attorney General's office, you have the Ohio Ethics Commission, you have the Inspector General, you have OCRC, you have all of those different agencies that are there to look out for that, and they are all looking for these cultural competence blunders and fixes, okay? And a lot of times it's not that they're trying to deliberately do this, it's just that it happens. So the guidelines are there to make sure that they don't happen, and when you're doing MCOD, multicultural organizational development, that's one of the things that you're looking for, so that you don't put your agency in jeopardy, but in the worst case scenario to get a lawsuit, and in the best case scenario to try and make sure that everybody's helped to the best of everyone's ability. And so another important thing is policy and procedure. You can have policy, and as I explained to some of the people, like I talk to students all the time, and they're like, oh, I got a job at so-and-so company, and I was like, oh, what are their policies like? And they were like, I had to read the policy book, but I didn't really read it. I just signed that I read it. And I was like, oh, okay. So they have the policies, which is only one part. So they're talking the talk. The important part is the procedure, because that's the walk, and that's a lot more difficult. How do you implement the policies that you're saying that are in the agency? And I also was explaining how if you have a hub of an agency, like let's say Girl Scouts United States, that has to filter down to all the other, councils, troops, everything else. So you have to make sure that they all are on the same page as well. And this was good for this hub gathering of executives, because a lot of them had like, oh, we're in Albany and we have to make sure they're doing things right in all of the counties in New York. And of course, that doesn't happen a lot. That's the walk part in the procedures. They all have policies, but, you know, trickling it down to all different locations can be problematic at times. So anyway, that's what we did. We did a thing on all the different types of cultural competence things, like different groups, religion, race, ethnicity, disability. We did stuff to sexual orientation, all of those things that they would encounter to make sure that their agency was up and coming. And there were even a few blunders and fixes that we had from lawsuits. There was a case where a woman who was working at the University of Toledo was discriminating against gay employees, and the university said that's not in keeping with our standards and our policies. And the university tried to have diversity training, and she just refused. And she was in HR, and then that really got out of hand. She ended up getting fired before the university got sued. So that was really interesting, this University of Toledo case. But you don't have to look very far to see these blunders. And it was interesting to see, you know, that some of them hadn't heard of these blunders before, and interesting to see their take on it and how would they fix it. So that's what we did, and that's what I wanted you to take away from the course, that we do have a seated program where we do a cultural competence. It's a week-long class. It's an intersession class. It's only a week long. It is a course, and it really is applied and immersive. So where you had to go and do an immersion experience, this is you go and do immersion as a whole with the class, and it's very intense. It's very hard, but you get the certification for cultural competence and Bridges Out of Poverty, which is another aspect of cultural competence, which we can't do online, but really interesting. So if anybody is around, you ever want to do that, maybe work as you know, the diversity, inclusion, and equity officer at your agency, that's an option for you. Just putting that out there. No pressure. Anyway, I just wanted to thank you for a good term, and I was very pleased with the enthusiasm in the posts, the insight. Actually, I used one of John's, the introduction to his immersion experience, where he did his immersion experience on his chosen area to immerse himself, and what he had to do in doing that, in accomplishing this this project. And I took his quote and put it in there and said, what do you think of this? And we had some interesting comments. I'm sure John's going to contact me and say, what did they say? They only had good things to say. So it was very interesting. And I put a couple other things that, you know, talking about, bragging about you guys and how well you did this term. So thank you for being part of my presentation. So yeah, so make sure that you save all my contact information in case some of you are thinking of going on for doctoral programs and you need a letter of reference, or any problem or issue you might have. Don't just close the class and then never check your grades again. I will straighten them all out finals week to make sure that everything, if there's something missing, I will contact you and say, don't forget, we have to do this, so that you know, and I can get your grades in. But other than that, thanks for a nice term. I hope you come up to me at graduation, or maybe contact me before, and we can maybe go out to an international dinner before graduation. Yeah, so I think that's it. Have a great set of holidays coming up, and stay in touch. Remember, it's a great day to be a dragon. See you guys later. Thank you.